Show's on!
Yo, what's going on YouTube? Baka here from Meta World Gaming, coming at you with a little something new today. We're going to do a post-game analysis of a Heimerdinger versus Sejuani matchup that was played by my teammate Santon Games here. And all three of us were in on the call, doing our typical team stream. But this is a pretty good example of how to beat the MF Sejuani matchup and plays that you can making through the game, start to finish, and kind of starts with the normal answering your opponent's curve, and then ending off the game with how to beat something like Riptide Rex in a situation where your opponent clearly has it. A lot of in-depth gameplay here, and I'm going to try to give as much insight as I can on the plays that we make as we go through the game, what the thought process that we're going through when we made them, reads that we're making on what our opponent's playing, and a little post-game review of things that we might have missed as well. But as always, just remember, down in the description below, we will have those deck codes for the current deck you see on screen, as well as all of our other decks that we will be updating regularly on our Mobalytics account. Also, be sure to check out our Twitch account. It's the best place for us to answer questions and for you guys to learn. Come in and chat, hang out, 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, EST, every night. And yeah, let's get into it. Alright, so against the MF Sejuani deck, we're going to be always looking for a good way to answer our opponent's curve through the game. Make sure that we have cards like Thermogenic Beam, Chempunk Pickpocket, Solitary Monk. Elusive guys are pretty good, but Shadow Assassin is a little too weak against this matchup, so we're not going to be keeping it. And Mystic Shot often just doesn't kill enough, so we're also not going to be keeping that in our opening hand. Vi is another decent card to be seeing in our opener. So we ended up finding our Chempunk Pickpocket, which is a great way to deal with the board in the early game. Can definitely get a free trade on this Omen Hawk here, as well as just trading up on anything that comes between turn 2 and turn 3. Ooh, and then the Solitary Monk there is going to be an easy turn 3. So we're going to play Chempunk here, and no matter what our opponent plays, we're probably going to be going into the attack. Opponent plays another Omen Hawk, so we're definitely going to attack and force our opponent to give us a free 1-1. Then we can potentially block the next 1-1 on the following turn. If our opponent doesn't have a second unit here, then we'd be able to deny them the plunder on the open attack. They do end up playing a triple Omen Hawk opener. It's kind of an insane start from the MF Sejuani deck, and I can see it live. We were reacting down there. I can see I'm just kind of like, this is a bit ridiculous, shaking my head a little bit down there. Anton's getting a good laugh out of it. And yeah, we're going to pass it up to opponent here. Now, opponent, we're really hoping that we don't end up seeing Misfortune this turn, but pretty much anything after a triple Omen Hawk start is going to be very scary. So, as I said before, we're definitely going to take a trade. We have a Solitary Monk in our hand, and we're definitely going to be able to keep up on board here. We have, we ended up getting 2 Omen Hawks out of our Chempunk, which, although I know they're just Omen Hawks, the damage over time is a lot. So being able to answer 2 of them off in the early game is pretty good for our Chempunk. Then this opens us up to play our Solitary Monk here. Sometimes it doesn't feel like great value to trade that Chempunk into a 1-1 when it has the 3 attack capability, but at this point, given that our opponent is triple Omen Hawk, it's pretty unlikely that it's going to be able to trade into anything, and this opens us up for a nice Solitary Monk here. There's pretty much no punish to playing our Shadow Assassin, so we're going to opt to play this. We're not going to be spending our mana on anything else this turn. Deep Meditation is definitely too slow, and we can start establishing a clock against our opponent. We don't have Heimerdinger, so it looks like our game plan at this point in the game is just to beat our opponent down with elusives, potentially taking a little bit of extra damage from just anything that our opponent plays at this point, try to keep will up, keep ourselves in the game. For the most part, it's going to be defend the elusives is our current game plan. Picking up another elusive, definitely pretty solid. Against the MF Sejuani deck, they have very low interaction. The only way that they can actually get the guys off your board is using Riptide Rex in the late game or using vulnerable cards. For the most part, the Make It Rain doesn't do a whole lot, and most of their bodies are, like, we can decide where we want to block and where we want to take damage. Because of their low interaction, just beat them down with elusives. So now our opponent played the Razor Scale Hunter here, Scout and Vulnerable, and of course you can see these Omen Hawk buffs are pretty absurd on this curve. Now, our opponent obviously targets our 4-3, the best elusive on board. For some reason, opts to not take the Scout attack first, but it technically wouldn't have really changed anything, because we're always going to Will of Ionia, the Razor Scale Hunter here. It costs 5 mana, so it's going to be a lot harder for our opponent to replay. The only consideration when putting a card like that back in the hand is, will the Vulnerable mat have a high impact on following turns, but the tempo of the putting a 5-mana card back into our opponent's hand here, as well as that card having Scout. It's definitely the best target for our will and the best way that we can play defense here. And then we're going to look to take 2 value trades. Our opponent could still have Make It Rain after this, but you can't just allow too much of this damage to be hitting us in the face. So we're going to opt to take these blocks here. And if we get Make It Rain, we get Make It Rained. It's a concession that you're going to have to make. It should kind of feel like a Make It Rain because our opponent didn't actually take the vulnerable attack, which felt a little odd. They were probably looking to get 12 damage in, have us take the value trades, and then Make It Rain. But we had the Twin Disciplines up still, so we weren't too worried about it. We're realistically only losing a 2-2 to this Make It Rain, or a 2-1 after the 1 damage is taken. So again, we're playing the Protect the Elusives game, and as long as we had that up, we didn't really have to worry about it. If we didn't have the Twin Disciplines in hand, I think that we could have taken our read on the Make It Rain here and opted to play a little bit differently. But because we have the Twin Disciplines, we get our protection up, and we're still just going to keep beating him down with elusives and still have a reasonable life total at this stage of the game. And we have a Shadow Assassin in hand that is looking a bit better than the Heimerdinger, but we had some slight consideration of, okay, our opponent doesn't have answers to Heimerdinger in their deck other than the vulnerable, but we clearly see that our opponent has the vulnerable in hand, so we don't really want to play Heimerdinger right now if we don't have any protection for Heimerdinger, and this will just be putting our opponent on a faster clock of elusives that our opponent can't really deal with. If they want to spend their time next turn dealing with that using the vulnerable attack, that's fine. That doesn't really bother us much. We've gotten our damage in for the most part, and they're still acting as blockers. Yep, there's the Razor Scale Hunter. A little weird that our opponent opted to pass before we went into combat there. I think they might have been anticipating just we played another guy and maybe they can, be selective with their targets there. But sometimes when you pass like that against the elusives because you think that your opponent's going to attack guaranteed, sometimes they just take the pass, and it's not actually good for you as the aggro deck. Control decks have a much better time taking passes like that. But we don't know what's in our opponent's hand exactly, so that the pass may have been fine there. So we're definitely going to play Deep Meditation here. We don't really have anything else to be doing with our 3 mana, and if you look at this, we had our 3 mana bank potential to go into turn 7 with 3 mana and have 10 total, but our Heimerdinger wasn't really looking protected there, and we didn't really have very many spells to be playing with our Heimerdinger at the time. So we're not really looking to do that. Instead, we can set up to gain spells to use with our Heimerdinger while we have the 3 mana Deep Meditation, because it wouldn't cost 3 mana on the following turn. It would end up being 5 mana this turn. Now that we can acquire more spells, once we play Heimerdinger here after our opponent goes to combat, potentially, or even on our own turn, we have more spells that we can actually utilize with it to push for that lethal potential. Because our opponent's at 8 life, that's what we're looking to set up right now. If we had played our Heimerdinger here, A, it might not be safe. B, we probably can't actually, we don't have spells to really be using with it. All we had were Deep Meditations, and the quick attack cards are not actually good right now. Neither is the Tough Turret from the Key Guardian. They're just not elusives. So we wanted to try to draw into some 3 mana spells, potentially Flash here, Twin Disciplines. Even Thermogenic Beam is fine because we can set it up to be 3 mana, either this turn or the following turn, things like that. So we realized, though, that because our opponent put Misfortune down, that if our opponent takes the Razor Scale Hunter attack, gets a value trade in there, and then attacks again, that's 2 MF triggers, potentially pushing lethal on us or just too much damage in general. And our Will of Ionia on its 5 mana card, when our opponent only has 4 mana, can't be replayed this turn, so it seems like the best tempo swing that we're going to get. But we wanted to make sure that we did it before combat, so our opponent didn't get that Scout attack value with Misfortune, of getting an additional 1 damage at our face, as well as being able to do it before going to the initial combat. So say they Scout attack, deal 1 damage with Misfortune there, and then still have their regular attack token, they can then start playing Plunder cards that they might be holding off on playing. Because if they have Plunder cards, they want to hit you with the Misfortune guaranteed. But if you do that now, if they play Plunder cards here, it's after combat. There's no more attack token to be gained after those Plunder cards. So we can potentially mitigate even more damage or force our opponent into losing some value there, just by denying that Scout attack pre-combat. Now we're kind of evaluating our hand here between Shadow Assassin and playing an additional spell this turn to get a cheat med on the following turn. With our Deep Meditation at 3, we're going on to turn 8. If we use up all our mana here, we could play Heimerdinger and then Deep Meditation next turn and push for an additional elusive card. And we're thinking that although the Thermogenic Beam here is a good way to play the second spell and kill MF, we could potentially play the elusive card and then play a 0 mana Thermogenic Beam just to get our second spell activator here so that we have a solid 3 mana spell for the following turn. Now, we still could use a Thermogenic Beam next turn as our 3-mana card, but there's a good chance that we're going to want to be looking for spells at this stage of the game because our opponent's going to be so low. We'll have 2 on board with our current Shadow Assassin. Then we'll gain 3 with our Deep Meditation on the following turn. This is going to be a 5 attack push while our opponent's at 8 life, where you really need to find a burn card. So that's why we're opting to set up for a Deep Med instead of opting to set up for a Thermogenic Beam. This also can potentially let us play a safer way to find more burn damage and more lethal potential, but still play around Riptide Rex. Now, as soon as you hit turn 8, you got to start thinking about the Riptide Rex play, and so one of the really heads-up plays that you can make at this stage of the game is our opponent's going to play this Make It Rain here. So we clearly know that opponent wants to set up for Riptide Rex. Now we're going to play our Deep Meditation as planned, show our opponent that we have a turret that we want to play. We thought about attacking there because we're thinking, okay, maybe we attack, get our damage, and then do this afterwards, but like it doesn't really make any sense to play around the Riptide Rex, and we need to make it look like we could be putting our opponent in lethal range. Opponent definitely recognizes that we haven't played any burn spells this game, really, so sky's the limit on how much we could have in hand, and then we're going to play Deep Meditation here and draw more cards and be threatening a lot of burn potential. So even one attack could put our opponent in lethal range if they're considering all of the burn spells in the Heimerdinger deck. So now we go with our Deep Meditation. We draw our spells, see what we get. Flash is going to be great for our future turns. Even the Refuge could help us out a lot. But we're going to pass here. And by passing, it's free, first of all, because we have a burst speed spell that we just played and passed, so we don't actually lose our turn here by passing if our opponent passes. And now our opponent, because we showed them that we have that turret in hand, wants to hold off for the Riptide Rex. Because if they play the Riptide Rex right now, we'd only be taking 5 damage to the face and our 2 guys die. But then we can play the 3-1, hit them in the face, and then just Mystic Shot, get excited, is going to finish the game off. So our opponent can't take that risk. And by doing so, we were able to actually force our opponent to skip their Riptide Rex. And the other read there is that our opponent used Make It Rain instead of Warning Shot, which means that they just shouldn't have Warning Shot in their hand. It wouldn't have made any sense. And then our opponent goes again to use Make It Rain there, which is huge, because they wanted to use their Riptide Rex again on this turn. I'm gonna roll that back, because this happened very, very quickly. So, alright. So we have, we get our opponent to get the Riptide Rex pass, right? On the previous turn by holding off on our turret. And potentially we can stop a Riptide Rex again, because we know that our opponent didn't... we are assuming that our opponent doesn't have good activators in hand, because they use Make It Rain and not Warning Shot. They might not have, they shouldn't have any Warning Shots, and they might have another Make It Rain, but we have Deny in hand. Now, we end up taking our pass here. We go into the next turn. There we go. Alright. So now we see that our opponent just draws for turn this leftmost card, and they're going to use that card out of their hands. So they didn't actually have another activator. Another good read here that we know that there shouldn't be any more Make It Rains. So now, by denying this Make It Rain here, our opponent shouldn't have any activators left before combat. If we can force our opponent into going into combat, using the Misfortune here to get their damage in, then we can stop the Riptide Rex from killing us. And we also have the opportunity to think about even killing the Misfortune and denying it again, and then having a blocker. But we can actually just, potentially, because our opponent could just have another Make It Rain that's a Misfortune in hand, we can definitely go for a different line and try to put our opponent into a similar position of last turn of generating turrets post-combat and trying to get our opponent to pass the Riptide Rex yet again by representing more turrets that the opponent just has to respect. Now, we're going to generate our 4-1 turret, which is just a fine blocker here. We don't really care about it trading into the 6-2 as much as it just stopping the damage. We'll take 1 damage from Misfortune, and the 1 damage kills our 4-1. But again, we don't care about trading with the 6-2. We just need to keep our life total at a high enough point that Riptide Rex can't kill us. Currently, we'd go to 8. Riptide Rex has 7 shots, kills 2 cards on our board, and deals 5 to our face. We'd be at 3, and we should still be at a reasonable life total to stop our opponent from killing us. However, there's always the possibility of stolen cards and our opponent playing something like Get Excited from our deck and killing us there. So we had a bit of a consideration of playing Spirit's Refuge here to gain a bit of life, but we just, we're assuming that 3 life should be enough. It's just the corner case of them stealing the 3 damage from our deck. If we don't end up playing the Spirit's Refuge here, though, we can make better plays afterwards by playing Key Guardian and Thermogenic Beam to set up for the 3-mana Thermogenic Beam to create 2 elusive turrets. And it looks like instead of sustaining through this turn by gaining the 4 better, that will be able to threaten the same play that we did last turn by having more turrets that are elusive turrets that can threaten lethal that our opponent is going to want to kill with Riptide Rex. So we're looking to potentially bait our opponent into passing the Riptide Rex again and only generating the turrets that are looking to win us the game on the following turn. Because elusive turrets are the only ones that matter at this stage of the game. The 4 ones are completely irrelevant. So before we play our turret here, we need to make sure that we Key Guardian it. As that, we wouldn't want to Key Guardian any of our other turrets. It just doesn't really make any sense. But before we play, because we only get, potentially if our opponent played Riptide Rex here, we'd only get 1 priority. So we don't want to play a turret and then miss out on generating another elusive turret here. Because our opponent could Riptide Rex here, and we only have 1 elusive turret, and they might realize the situation that they were put in the predicament of on the previous turn, right? So now, instead, we're going to play Thermogenic Beam, target our opponent's Misfortune here. This is just better than the 6-2. The 6-2 doesn't really matter at this stage of the game. So before we give our opponent the priority to play the Riptide Rex, we pretty much guarantee that we're going to get at least another elusive turret, and then decide to develop our turrets afterwards in an order that makes the most sense to play around Riptide Rex. So the tough turret is the freest one. This could just soak up damage on Riptide Rex. We don't care if it dies, even if he does play the card. We're not going to just start developing the it can't deal damage this game, right? It's just, we're just hoping that this might eat up some targets if he does. It's like right here, our opponent could have played Riptide Rex, but the tough turret would have helped mitigate damage. Now they did it again. They tried to wait for us to play the last elusive turret because they're thinking, okay, like this could still kill me potentially. I want to try to get all the value out of this, and then they just don't, and they pass again. So we get him with it again. I think our opponent definitely made a mistake there and probably should have Riptide Rex there, but then we'd still have the elusive turret and be able to potentially win on the following turn. Now, we opt to go for the Vi here, and we didn't need to play the elusive turret last turn because this is how we saw our lethal. Now, if you're paying attention here on our previous turn, I can roll this back a little bit. We didn't actually have lethal on board here. See how we have a 2-1, a 3-1, and a Mystic Shot in hand over here. This is only a total of 7 damage while our opponent is at 8 life. But because we have 2 Vi's in hand, we know that we can play Vi and then use Vi's Vault Breaker to then increase our 2-1 to 4 attack, as well as generate an elusive turret. So even in the event that our opponent would be able to kill one of our guys, which would be the 4-1 because it has the most attack, 2 other elusives will get through for 3, and then we Mystic Shot for game. Or alternatively, all 3 of them get through and we threaten lethal like that. Again, we know that our opponent shouldn't have any activators in hand. They would have used any warning shots at this point already. And we also just killed Misfortune, denying potential copies of Make It Rain with the because that is Misfortune's champion spell. It was a very important part of killing the Misfortune last turn instead of the 6-2. Is just denying the Make It Rain potential there. Lucky for us, our opponent did not manage to rip an elusive 1-drop. That would have made it potentially slightly harder. But now we're going to go for our Vault Breaker on our Shadow Assassin, and this should just be GG here. The opponent's deck has extremely low interaction, and one of the stolen cards from our deck was Flash of Brilliance. We were considering what the cards that could have come out of Flash of Brilliance are, so potentially one of them was Harsh Winds that our opponent could have gotten that could have stopped us from winning the game this turn, but considering that we'd be developing a Vi here, and our opponent's almost entire turn would be the Riptide Rex is actually just going to get mitigated at this point by us having a big enough board. So even if our opponent does manage to live through this turn, we should be in a winning position off of just our board alone. Heimer leveling up is very nice as well. Again, because if this fails, and then we go to Riptide Rex on the following turn, so I'm going to take 2 shots to kill. Opponent goes to play Pilfer Goods, stealing more cards from our deck. Potentially could have found some form of removal spell in combination with something from their deck. They got another Flash of Brilliance. They still have 7 mana. They could have still gotten Harsh Winds. Potentially, there's a couple single target removals that are in the deck that we would win through with Mystic Shot. And then we end up seeing one of them here double up. And we sit there and look at it for a second, and we're like, okay, hold on. Let's think about what our opponent could have. Like, does this ever matter in any capacity? It shouldn't. We're just going to say accept, and then this should just be GG. Opponent only has 1 mana. Opponent did not get any reduced cost cards, so there shouldn't be any potential of our opponent grabbing Mystic Shot out of our deck for 1 mana, because they never played Black Market Merchant. So seeing that there's no reduction, there's nothing in our opponent's deck that we play around for 1 mana, there's nothing in our deck that we play around for 1 mana. So at that point, we just go to our open attack. We get our Vi level up just in case. There's no reason not to take it. Take your 2-1, and then Mystic Shot, and that's GG. Guaranteed. There are no responses to burn in the MF Sejuani deck. And even if they steal cards from our deck at 1 mana, there's no responses. So it's all about navigating that low interaction from our opponent there at the end of the game, as well as trying to make the best plays around Riptide Rex, which you can definitely evaluate where you can show your opponent that you have turrets and then end up just not playing them to protect your Heimerdinger and stop the Riptide Rex. The Riptide Rex is definitely the scariest play, but our opponent, the first time around, I think, made the intelligent play of recognizing that potentially us just playing one more turret there could have been their demise. So if we play the other turret, they can then Riptide Rex and basically kill our entire board. And if we decide to take pass, they don't take the 2 damage from the elusive there and protect themselves from burn. The second time around, I think they might have had to realize, or that they probably should have recognized, that the risk is a little too high of the passing, considering that they probably didn't have any responses, and now we have 5 elusive damage on the board, and they're going to be put in a pretty poor position if they don't play the Riptide Rex. However, they're still in a poor position if we played our 3-1 afterwards. We're still going to end up with an elusive and have a pretty good shot at killing our opponent there, which could have just been play the elusive next turn, buff it up, have burn damage, and similar fashion. But I think we would have been 1 damage short that way if our opponent had taken the Riptide Rex. But then also because we played our tough turret first there, the Riptide Rex just had actually this wasn't a guarantee from our opponent. Let me see if I can find the spot in the game. There we go. So the turn before, this is what we had on our board. By playing the tough turret first, there's always the chance to skew from our opponent's Riptide Rex. So if it kind of over-targets, it might have actually not even killed one of the elusive cards on the board. And it could have, like, over-targeted the tough guy. Like, maybe the Heimer lives, maybe one of the elusive turrets lives. And then we generate another elusive turret on top of that, and you're pretty screwed as the opponent. So he's waiting for us to play that last turret and then try to get maximum odds there. So it's a little bit of a tough call to make. I wouldn't say it's just straightforward, like, yeah, this might happen again where, like, they pass on the final elusive turret. It kind of looked like we weren't, because we might have just not had the burn cards in hand, and we wanted to construct exactly 8 damage on board. And they were thinking, okay, well, if that happens, like, I got to play Riptide Rex. If it's the 3, I could still lose to the burn. I might not finish off all the cards on the board. It's kind of hard to say how Riptide Rex rolls, and it definitely makes it a lot harder when you put that tough turret on the board, making the percentage chance of a favorite outcome just a bit less. So overall, I don't think the opponent misplayed it all the first time. The first time it seemed correct. Second time, there was definitely a hard position to be put in. And I think I would have opted to take the Riptide Rex there, but I can't say that's an easy call. That's for sure. Opponent not having Warning Shot was definitely another big thing there. We've read that our opponent didn't have Warning Shot by the way they used Make It Rain, and then also denied opponents additional potential of Make It Rain by killing the Misfortune. So a lot of good ways to navigate around that. I do think it's pretty crazy, though, that our opponent started triple Omen Hawk and had like a 6/6 Jagged Butcher. This is kind of how the game ended up panning out. A lot of times we say, when we're playing this matchup, and a lot of people ask about it, oh, this matchup seems really hard for the Heimerdinger deck. And yes, they can curve insanely well, but most of the time it's Riptide Rex. Riptide Rex is the main card that you have to play around, because you can just understand that your opponent's deck doesn't have a ton of interaction. So the only time it gets really scary is when they rob like 8 cards out of your deck with the Plunder cards. And I mean, if your opponent draws 8 cards from your deck, a lot of times they're just supposed to beat every deck. It's not even a Heimer problem. It's just, those are just the ridiculous hands. So you end up having to play around your own cards a little bit too much. But yeah, playing around Riptide Rex like that in a fashion of holding your turrets is probably the key to victory in navigating the late game. And then just trying to construct your lethal as best you can, using the elusive guys. Even without Heimerdinger that game, we had put in quite a bit of damage with just our Solitary Monk and Shadow Assassin. So it looked like we could have just potentially won the game anyway if we just found any, protection instead of Heimerdinger and just ran those out. But thanks for tuning in, guys. Be sure to check out the other Heimerdinger guides as well on our channel if you're looking to improve your Heimer game in a general sense and not just specific matchups. I hope this gameplay was really helpful. Check our Twitch out. All the links are down in the description below. Check us out 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every night, boys. You can check us out. You can learn some gameplay. We play a couple different decks. Heimer questions too. We love answering them all the time. We like to try to respond to YouTube questions in the comments section, but the best place to find us is definitely on Twitch, or if you join the Discord down below, follow the socials. We can answer pretty much anywhere that you ask us questions, but I think Twitch is definitely the best place to go. All right, later, guys.